questions. Question number 1, Jan Lamont.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day.
First Minister.
Well, later today, Presiding Officer, I will be speaking with the Chief Executive Officer of Scottish wind turbine manufacturer Gaia Wind, who has today announced the signing of a £5 million contract to provide up to 200 small turbines for installation in England and Wales. I am sure the whole Chamber will wish to welcome a successful company agreeing contracts, enhancing its reputation as the leading manufacturer of small wind turbines across these islands.
Jan Lamont.
Indeed we do. The new Forth Crossing is the most expensive public project in Scottish history. It is central to attempts to sustain and grow Scottish businesses and create much-needed jobs. This project should have a legacy that goes beyond a bridge. People understand that. So why did the First Minister sign away the contracts and the Scottish jobs to Spain, Poland and China?
First Minister.
Well, in reality, of course, 118 out of 155 subcontracts in the project have been awarded to Scottish companies, representing 76% of the total awarded. In terms of supply orders, 870 out of 1,041 supply orders, that's 83.5%, Ms Bailey, have been awarded to principal contract to Scottish companies. That is a very substantial percentage. It means that the Forth Replacement Crossing project will support 1,200 Scottish jobs and secure an additional 3,000 more. Every year, construction will deliver 45 vocational training positions, 21 professional body places, 46 positions for long-term unemployed, and maximise the number of modern apprenticeships opportunities. I think, all in all, that looks to me like a substantial good deal to Scotland from the Forth Replacement Crossing.
Joanne Lamont.
Well, I have to say that I'm stunned by the limit of ambition that the First Minister shows. This contract was to be a legacy for the people of this country and for the economy. £20 million on his own minister's account out of a contract worth £1.5 billion. The First Minister has no excuses. In Wales, a Labour government had the political will to ensure Welsh companies had equal access to public contracts, saving businesses and creating jobs. But rather than look to our neighbours, Alex Salmond went to China and pulled off a master deal. The Chinese got an £800 million steel contract and we got 2 pandas. If Wales can deliver for Welsh businesses, what is stopping the Scottish First Minister delivering for Scottish businesses and Scottish families?
First Minister.
I know
First Minister.
The total value, can I tell Joanne Lamont, of the contract is £790 million. That's the total value of the Forth Replacement Crossing principal contract. In terms of the steel component of that contract, it's about 5 to 10%. I'm not sure if Joanne Lamont knows this, but we don't actually have a fabrication facilities for steel in Scotland, thanks to the depredations of past Westminster governments. So no firm that submitted tenders for the steel fabrication subcontracts were Scottish, but of the 5 to 10% of the £790 million, perhaps a quarter to a half would be steel plating, which we do produce in Scotland. I merely say this, when John Lamont says there's an £800 million contract, we now know that the steel is actually 5 to 10% of that, and of that, 25 to 50% is actually the sort of steel that we produce in Scotland. So I know this is not the script that Joanne Lamont wanted to hear, but I think that having 76% of the total subcontracts awarded to Scottish companies not only represents a good deal for Scottish companies, but it's amazingly better than anything that happened when the Labour Party were in power in Scotland.
One moment, Ms Lamont. Ms Bailey, could you please keep quiet? John Lamont.
I think the First Minister thinks this is a game. This is not a script that the people of Scotland want to hear. That the First Minister's ambition, he says, oh, it's not £1.5 billion, it's £20 million out of £790 million. So that makes it okay. A tiny proportion of the money that is going. The reality is that the biggest contract in Scotland for a generation is creating jobs in Spain, in Poland and in China. Alex Salmond is spending £800 million on steel, and from that contract, not a single job has been created in Scotland at a time when 200 people are losing their jobs every day. Even the London Olympics has benefited Scottish companies to the tune of £100 million, 5 times more than the benefit from the Forth Road Bridge contract. How can it be value for money to send abroad in the long term? How could it be in the value for money to send profits, business creation, research and development and high-quality jobs that these big contracts generate? How can it make sense for these to be sent abroad?
First Minister.
I have to say there's a great disadvantage in reading a script. Occasionally you'll read the wrong line from the script, but also it means that you don't listen to the previous answers. Now, in the previous answer, I pointed out that the total value of the contract is £790 million. Of that, 5 to 10%, that's 5 to 10% is the steel contract. That is fabricated steel. We don't do fabricated steel in Scotland. Of the fabricated steel contract, perhaps a quarter to a half is steel plate, which we do in Scotland. Now that Joanne Lamont realises that the £800 million she was given in her script is not actually the figure, but is a small fraction of that, will she revise her opinion in terms of the total impact of what the Scottish Government is doing? Now, in terms of contracts, see, I agree with Joanne Lamont that we must do our absolute best in terms of making sure that contracts come to Scottish companies. I wonder if Joanne Lamont, because she'll be in this chamber, remembers Jack McConnell when he was in this place at First Minister's Questions on June 2005, 16th of June. Restricted I am by the rules of procurement. We had to explain why a fisheries protection vessel was going to a Polish shipyard instead of Ferguson's at Port Glasgow. What a contrast between the announcement last November by Alec Neil of a £20 million contract for a new ferry to Ferguson's in Scotland.
Joanne Lamont.
And he accuses me of not being able to read my script. I'm sure it was well worth the research by civil servants to find that quote, but can we deal with what people in this country are saying now, including workers, community trade union workers who are concerned about their jobs, and, of course, all of those businesses and all of those people beyond steel who believed that this contract would bring work to their communities. A fortnight ago, the First Minister claimed, in response to the shocking unemployment figures, that his government puts the highest emphasis on job creation. And yet, here we are. And actually, I can't believe that I'm saying this, but we're in a situation, and I have it here, a letter from Scottish trade unionists at the DL Steelworks asking David Cameron, a Tory Prime Minister, to protect them from the actions of a Scottish First Minister. I know, I can't believe it either. And they say, to date, Alex Salmond, they say, these are community trade unionists in Scotland, steel workers, saying, to date, Alex Salmond has failed to give any satisfactory explanation why foreign suppliers were given preference over Scottish firms. Why is the First Minister not doing his job? Why is the First Minister not standing up for Scotland? Will the First Minister stand up for Scottish workers and instruct an immediate review of this disgraceful contract, which will have huge consequences across our communities?
First Minister.
Well, let's try 4 reasons. Firstly, given that Joanne Lamont didn't return to it, I think we're probably now agreed that it's not an £800 million contract, but 5 to 10% of it. Can we now agree that there is no steel fabrication proposal from Scotland no firm that submitted a tender for the steel fabrication subcontracts were Scottish. That's because we don't have steel fabrication facilities in Scotland anymore, thanks to the depredations of the United Kingdom past governments, both Labour and Conservative. Can we also agree that there is substantial evidence from the figures on subcontracts which I put forward that 76% of these have been awarded to Scottish companies? Fourthly, can we agree that Joanne Lavin must be aware that you cannot just direct contracts to go to Scottish companies? They have to be competitively placed out. But what this government has done by establishing the portal for contracts is allowed tens of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses in Scotland to obtain the benefit of public procurement and purchasing. That is what has happened under this administration. In the past administration, largely due to Labour's fascination with the private finance initiative, there was no ability to influence these things whatsoever. So given that she now knows the actual value of the contract, that she probably now knows there are no steel fabricating facilities in Scotland, that she now knows that 76% of the subcontracts have gone to Scottish companies, and she's aware of the efforts that have been made through the portal, will she finally agree that this situation is hugely better than it was under her and her colleagues when they were in administration?
Question number 2, Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Now that he is finally live on the BBC, I'd like to ask the First Minister when he'll next meet the Secretary of State for Scotland.
First Minister.
Well, I understand we're, on the basis that the Secretary of State for Scotland is fully recovered, that we're meeting this coming Monday.
Thank the First Minister for his answer. And after the First Minister claiming grudge and grievance for being pulled from BBC radio and TV sports programmes, it's now emerged that it was in fact him that asked them, not once, not twice, but 3 times to be a rugby pundit. On reflection, does the First Minister think it was acceptable to use the bully pulpit of his office to liken a BBC employee to a Nazi, and will he now apologise?
First Minister.
Well, let's take the things in turn. I was assuming that a number of things. Firstly, that Ruth Davidson would be aware that the noun gauleiter is defined in the Chamber's 21st Century Dictionary as an overbearing wielder of petty authority. It's been used in public parlance a number of times. There's nothing... There's nothing petty about the authority that the Tory government in London tries to insert over Scotland. She'd also be aware, I hope, that the tradition that we come to expect in the BBC is that editorial and journalistic decisions are free to be made and are not overridden by political factors. Yes, of course, my programme in terms of attending the rugby on Saturday was made aware to news outlets of all kinds, as indeed was Ruth Davidson's, because I saw her pre-release that very day. But can I just point out the email from Carol Hicks, the head of sports of the BBC, which I'm happy to put in spice to correct misapprehensions of Ruth Davidson. This is proposing. I've been having a little think, and I'd like to ask if the First Minister would take part in our Six Nations Challenge. He goes on to describe the nature of the programme he wants to take part in. I think this would be a great way of us involving the First Minister in BBC's TV coverage. We'll be doing this live in the West Car Park, be live around 1:45. Happy to discuss any of this. I'm currently checking this out with our editorial policy team, but we don't anticipate any problems. The reason that Mr Hicks didn't anticipate any problems is he didn't know that there was going to be a political instruction from the political adviser to withdraw the First Minister of Scotland from a programme. I think journalists have the right to expect better from the British Broadcasting Corporation.
Ruth Davidson.
By after having a wee think, presumably she meant after his office had been on the phone. With such outrage at the weekend, presiding officer, I thought I'd check the First Minister's rugby qualifications. He's got the build for it, surely a glittering career behind him. But in the Linlithgow Academy rugby team archive, no mention A. Salmond. In the St Andrews University rugby team, no mention A. Salmond. Royal Bank of Scotland Rugby Club, no mention A. Salmond. In today's papers, his official spokesman says the First Minister is so outraged that he's raising the snub with the head of the BBC Trust, Lord Patton, because it's all about him, his Brugge ego, his injured pride. Today's meeting was supposed to be about the future of broadcasting, people's jobs, their careers, their livelihoods. These are surely more important than the First Minister's stymied ambitions. So will the First Minister confirm to this chamber, to those who are broadcasting this exchange on the BBC and to those watching at home, that he won't waste a second of the time in his meeting with Lord Patton on this petty sideshow, but will focus on what matters: Scottish jobs?
First Minister.
I'm afraid the reasons given for the BBC's withdrawal of the invitation made by their sports editor are not petty and really have to be confronted. There were two reasons. One was the proximity to the local government elections. We're not in the local government election period. And secondly, there was the claim of heightened tension in the political arena. Now, there may be some heightened tension in terms of the Tory backbenches. What I detect is merely political debate that's taking place. If this heightened tension period is to last for the next 2.25 years, do I therefore assume that we won't be treated to the sight of David Cameron on any Olympic coverage from London? That during this period of heightened tension that politicians will not be asked to take part in sports programmes. We'll never get the benefit of Ruth Davidson's opinions on rugby, football and anything else. This is a nonsensical decision, or even kickboxing, as I understand she has substantial expertise. So, look, if we're going to adopt a position in the BBC that politicians are to be withdrawn from broadcasts, overriding journalistic and editorial decisions, I think we're going down a very difficult road indeed. It's entirely possible that we should be able to revert to a position where the journalistic and editorial aspect and judgment is sacrosanct in the BBC, or is it just another reason why we've got to ensure that Scottish broadcasting is free from diktats from London? And finally, when I meet Chris Patton this afternoon, I won't accuse his
Order, please settle down.
I won't accuse his former chairmanship of the Conservative Party as having anything to do with current BBC decision-making.
Drew Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. You will be aware of the uncertainty facing thousands of Clydesdale Bank workers. Clydesdale, of course, headquartered in Glasgow and a major employer across Scotland and a strategically important company for the Scottish economy and bank for many small and medium-sized businesses. Following the Scottish Government's reported contact with Clydesdale, what assurances can the First Minister offer workers and their families who face an uncertain beginning to 2012 as a result of the statements from the parent bank National Australia? And specifically, will the First Minister agree to meet with Unite the Union as representatives of that workforce to listen to their fears and hear first-hand their suggestions for how the long-term future of the business as a Scottish headquartered company can be secured?
First Minister.
I've already spoken to the Chief Executive of Clydesdale, and I know Mr Swinney has spoken to him as well about the implications of the statement from the Chief Executive Officer. I'll gladly agree to meet with the Unite Union and Workers representatives as well. When we examine that statement from the Chief Executive Officer in Australia, then it should give us great cause for concern. He cites in terms of the structural review of Clydesdale and Yorkshire Bank certainly the underlying difficulties of the Eurozone, but he also cited in the strongest terms the policy in terms of retrenchment from the United Kingdom government, the period of austerity and the lack of growth prospects in the United Kingdom economy. A lot of us will find it somewhat ironic that we've got baseless claims from the Chancellor of the Exchequer about the impact of investment and constitutional change in Scotland. And here we have the Chief Executive Officer of one of the major banks in the world who directly points to the austerity programme of the United Kingdom Government as a reason for a significant review of the bank and its policies. So certainly we'll meet the unions, we'll meet the workers, we'll continue a dialogue with Clydesdale and Yorkshire banks in terms of protecting employment in Scotland. But let's hear no more of the argument that a no-growth austerity programme is good for jobs and investment in Scotland.
Nigel Dawn.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware that last week Ross & Bonnyman, which is based in Forfar since 1973 and specialises in designing and manufacturing lifting products, went into liquidation with a loss of 80 jobs. Does the First Minister share my concern regarding the impact such job losses will have on the small community? And can I ask him what support the Scottish Government can provide to ensure that some highly skilled members of that workforce find new employment as swiftly as possible?
First Minister.
Well, I share the member's concern regarding Ross & Bonnyman going to administration and the impact it will have on the employees affected, their families and indeed the whole town of Forfar. I assure the member will do everything possible to minimise the time those individuals affected by redundancy are out of work. I confirm we have already taken immediate action to provide support through PACE for the affected employees. The local PACE team is also, at this moment, discussing arrangements to hold an event for the employees in the Reid Hall in Forfar, where people have the opportunity to meet with a range of partners for advice and support. I understand the interest has been expressed by the employer in the area who is seeking to recruit employees. We will do everything we can to facilitate this and any other such interest.
Question number 3, Willie Rennie.
To ask the First Minister what issues will be discussed at the next meeting of the Cabinet.
First Minister.
Next meeting of the Cabinet will discuss issues of importance to the people of Scotland.
Willie Rennie.
Before Scotland's Freedom of Information Commissioner Kevin Dunyan stood down last week, he warned that Scotland's Freedom of Information system is at risk of slipping behind other countries, including the rest of the UK. That's surely a serious blow to our aims of being a beacon for progress. Surely that's the case. Why did the First Minister block the extension of information laws to cover housing associations, PFI companies and other public bodies?
First Minister.
I suppose two answers to that. Firstly, I think the freedom of information laws in Scotland are substantially better and more progressive than those elsewhere. Secondly, there were representations across a range of organisations which explained at this time of some difficulty this would not be the moment to extend the freedom of information legislation. And can I gently point out to Willie Rennie, if the Liberal Party thought that was so important, then they would have used their very substantial influence in the last coalition administration to actually bring it forward in Scotland.
Willie Rennie.
We are very proud of our freedom of information progress that we made when we were in government. I think the First Minister should reflect upon his progress on freedom of information. It's also Kevin Dunyan that said it was Scotland that was in danger of slipping behind the rest of the UK. And he seems to have let the objections of others overrule the sensible proposals from the Information Commissioner. Access to information is important in a free and liberal Scotland to challenge those who wield power. Why can tenants in Lanarkshire get information about their rent increases, but tenants in Glasgow cannot? Why can an arm's-length company spending millions of pounds of taxpayers' money dodge giving answers when councils cannot? It's not my words. Kevin Dunyan said this. I'm not entirely clear why the government has decided to roll back. Can the First Minister be clear? He always wants to be David, but isn't he now Goliath, blocking the rights of ordinary Scots?
First Minister.
Oh, no, I'll stick to being David, if that's all right. I remember the result of that particular contest. The matter's under consideration. We're sympathetic. I mean, I'm particularly sympathetic, incidentally, to the examination in detail of private finance initiative contracts. I'm extremely sympathetic on that score, although I could again gently point out that we haven't signed many PFI contracts as opposed to the huge volumes that were signed by the Labour and Liberal Party in government in Scotland, which is perhaps another argument why the public procurement policy being supported by this government is proving significantly more successful than the private procurement policy of our predecessors.
Question number 4, Roderick Campbell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what recent discussions he has had with the Secretary of State for Defence regarding the establishment of a multi-role brigade at Lucas.
First Minister.
Well, the impact of the UK Government's basing review decisions on Lucas and other affected communities across Scotland remains a key concern for the Scottish Government. The Cabinet Secretary for Parliamentary Business and Government Strategy wrote to the Secretary of State for Defence on Friday, the 3rd of February, requesting an urgent meeting to discuss progress and seek reassurance that the commitments made on July 2011 will stand, including that Lucas becomes home to part of the multi-role brigade.
Roderick Campbell.
I thank the First Minister for his response. The First Minister will be aware of press comments that the Secretary of State, Philip Hammond, has cast doubt over the deployment of the multi-role brigade 7 months after his predecessor confirmed this very commitment in a statement to the House of Commons. Does the First Minister agree that this type of fear-mongering is very unsettling to my constituents? Will he join with me in condemning them and urge Mr Hammond to offer clarity on this situation as a matter of urgency?
First Minister.
Well, I think Roderick Campbell makes a very good point about his constituents. When communities accept military bases, whether it be in the Air Force or the Army, then they've got a right to expect a long-term commitment. That's exactly the long-term commitment that the Scottish National Party proposes should be given by government. The Defence Review last year had some very hard decisions as far as Scotland was concerned. There were hard decisions for Kinloss, there were hard decisions for Lucas. But we had a policy announced after significant representations were made on a cross-party basis by this Parliament and others, which had some benefits for Scotland in the overall balance. It would be disgraceful if there was any attempt by the new Defence Secretary to unpick that arrangement. Of course, he has not said that as a policy. He has hinted it in a letter to a Member of Parliament. In terms of policy, the MOD say there is no change from last year's commitment. So, can I say two things? One, that politicians, whether the Secretary of State for Defence or any other, should not use in terms of political argument the future of bases as some sort of political weapon in hinting to MPs in letters. And secondly, the outrage that there would be in Scotland if there is any reneging on the commitments last year would encompass every part of the community and every single party in Scotland.
Question number 5, Hugh Henry.
To ask the First Minister whether the Scottish Government considers that the introduction of new national exams in 2013-14 is on schedule.
First Minister.
Yes, the new national qualifications are on course for 2013-14. The track record of Curriculum for Excellence programme shows we have met every target and request for additional support from educational authorities. In taking forward implementation of Curriculum for Excellence, dispensation for targeted delays of 1 year to new national qualifications is available where circumstances justify it.
Hugh Henry.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary has assured Parliament that the introduction of Curriculum for Excellence is on track. Scotland's teachers are telling us that the materials are not ready and they are not ready. Are Scotland's teachers wrong? First Minister.
Well, that's not the view of the stakeholders across Scotland. The particular example, as Hugh Henry knows, of East Renfrewshire is a very particular one because they stopped uniquely using standard grades in 2005, replacing them with the intermediate qualification. But the view of stakeholders is not as Hugh Henry has put forward. For example, if we take Glenn Roger, the President of the Association of Directors of Education, who says, "We have been fully involved in and remain fully committed to the implementation of Curriculum for Excellence, including the broad general phrase until S3, the exciting and challenger senior phrase, the new qualification framework. There has been strong consensus about that approach, and that consensus includes teachers in Scotland, the vast majority of whom are enthusiastic about the opportunities involved in Curriculum for Excellence."
Liz Smith.
First Minister, the Cabinet Secretary for Education said on GMS last Friday, and I quote, "East Renfrewshire is in a very special position," and that he was not surprised that they wanted to do things differently. Why then should all other local authorities be told that it would be tremendously disruptive if they were to do things differently?
First Minister.
Well, I thought I already mentioned the East Renfrewshire Council's unique position is that they stopped using standard grades in 2005 and replaced them with the intermediate qualifications. The other 31 local authorities all still use standard grades, and they've all confirmed they'll move to the new nationals within their current S2 cohort in 2013-2014. I thought that is the unique position of East Renfrewshire and explains the difference in their decision-making. Can I just point out, in fairness to East Renfrewshire, that they've also said that they are fully and absolutely committed to the implementation of Curriculum for Excellence, saying on the 31st of January, our staff have engaged fully in the implementation of Curriculum for Excellence and the introduction of the new nationals and will continue to do so. There is a huge fund of goodwill, optimism about the new qualifications in Scotland. Curriculum for Excellence has wide and broad-based support. I hope that that broad-based support and the educational community in Scotland at some point will be reflected across this chamber in the political parties.
Question number 6, Stuart McMillan.
To ask the First Minister how important offshore opportunities in the west of Scotland are in helping to meet the Scottish Government's renewables targets.
First Minister. Well, offshore renewable projects totalling 2.2 gigawatts, the Argyll Array 1.5 gigawatts, Isla Array 680 megawatts have already been proposed for the west of Scotland, the equivalent to the power requirements of over 1 million households. These projects involve the estimate investment of over £6,000 million, up to 5,700 direct jobs. The West Coast is important to offshore renewable ambitions, as set out in the IELTS study. At peak construction phase, the building of offshore grid could support up to 2,000 direct and indirect jobs in Scotland.
Stuart McMillan.
I thank the First Minister for his response, and I am obviously delighted that the West of Scotland will play such an important role in Scotland achieving its renewables potential. Now, I note the comments made by Conservative politicians this week being critical of the development of renewable energy. Will the First Minister offer reassurances of this Government's commitment to renewables, so that I can tell my constituents in the West, and also that Tory scare stories will not affect the chances of gaining employment in this vital industry for Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, yes, you can, and it should be said that today we're seeing another significant announcement in the Technological and Innovation Centre at the University of Strathclyde, recognised as being the headquarters of the new Catapult initiative announced by the UK Government today. That comes on top of the £89 million invested by the Scottish Government in establishing that centre last year, which is creating 700 new research jobs in Scotland. Now, these are research jobs in the offshore wind sector, which is now being opposed by prominent people in the Conservative Party. Struan Stevenson, supported, I understand, by the former Deputy Leader Murdo Fraser. So, given that these hundreds of new jobs are coming to the City of Glasgow, is at any point the Conservative Party leader going to address these people and explain why prominent people in the Conservative Party want to eliminate their jobs? Or will any Conservative politician go on a tour round the places in Scotland already benefiting from this offshore revolution? Machrihanish, Glasgow, Methil, Aberdeen? Or go to the places which are shortly to benefit, like the Porteleaf or Dundee or Nig, and tell them why the Conservative and Unionist Party want to eliminate thousands of jobs in Scotland because some of their prominent members think it will give them a press headline or two.
Duncan McNeill, very briefly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the First Minister tell us, given his optimistic view of opportunities in the West Coast, when we can expect a review of the national renewables infrastructure plan to ensure that places like Inverclyde, the skills that we have and the infrastructure that we have will be fully recognised and give us the best chance of gaining those green jobs?
First Minister.
Well, the infrastructure plan is under constant appraisal. It was appraised, for example, at a meeting only yesterday. But can I assure Duncan McNeill that I think ports the length and breadth of Scotland are going to benefit from the investment that's taking place in the offshore renewables industry. The announcements that have taken place have been hugely encouraging for the ports involved. There are a number of announcements still to come, and the Scottish Government is making sure that every port and its capabilities in every area around the coastline of Scotland is set to benefit. But I would hope that in this great enterprise to engineer and fabricate the future energy requirements, not just of Scotland, but of these islands and perhaps much of Europe, then that campaign, which offers the prospect of the reindustrialisation of this country, will have maximum cross-party support, because it's that balance of cross-party support that's put Scotland in the lead and we intend to maintain that lead as we move forward. So give the people and the workers and the engineers in this industry a bit of backing and let them get on with the job for Scotland.
That ends First Minister's question time. I now suspend until 2:30.